Yeah, very big day indeed, because the world's biggest museum within literally the last few moments has just opened its doors behind me. Opened its doors, it has to be said, with relatively little fanfare. There's a small queue of people heading inside, and it will be for those who are on their way in today and for days in the foreseeable future. A relatively different experience inside the Louvre. It's going to be a more intimate one, I suppose, and one where we all have to be slightly more cautious of our hygiene. People have to wear masks, of course, when they are inside the building. There'll be stickers indicating where you can move to try and avoid crowding in particular areas. But if you're an art buff, perhaps, if you're in Paris, really, this is the time to come to the Louvre, because of those restrictions, the museum's authorities have reduced the number of people coming in by around 70%, and that means it's going to be altogether more intimate than it was in the past. If you've been to see the Mona Lisa perhaps previously but couldn't get near the painting because there are so many people crowding in front of it, well, it'll be very different this time. In front of the Mona Lisa, there'll be 2 rows of people. You can stand there for about 10 minutes and you should have a pretty clear look at that famous painting. But it is worth saying that if you are going to come and visit this labyrinthian museum, perhaps good to download the map on your phone before you come, because of those hygiene restrictions, you can't bring a paper map with you anymore, so you may get a little lost once you're inside.
You get lost with a paper map as well. Nadia, as I mentioned, though, I mean, there are massive financial problems, aren't there, for that museum?
Yeah, difficult financial times ahead, certainly, for the Louvre. You mentioned that figure of the 40 million that they've lost in this unprecedented 16-week closure. And the Louvre normally brings in around 200 million euros a year. About half of that is from state subsidies, and the other half from ticketing and from visitors coming through. And of course, because they have to allow less people in the building, there will be less money coming in the coming months. Also because the majority of visitors to the Louvre have always been foreigners. About 75 to 80% of tourists come from outside of France. So one of the challenges now for the Louvre is how to encourage French people to visit this museum. And we were just speaking actually to one of the tour guides here at the museum, who is telling us that actually they're very disappointed in the French government. They tell us that they were hoping that there would be a specific fund put in place for the Louvre and for other big famous museums here in France, like Versailles. And in fact, we're hoping to see within the next few minutes a flash mob organised by those guides just here outside the Louvre to petition the government to draw attention to the fact that they are coming back to work with a very uncertain financial future. That said, though, the bosses of the Louvre have said they've weathered tough times before. After the 2015 terror attacks, and indeed after 9/11, the Louvre saw about a 40% annual drop in visitors. So it's hoping that, having weathered tough times before, it can weather them again and it can make that recovery.